Hi, in this video, we're still looking at how neighborhoods feed and make money. But we're focusing now on part 2, which is permaculture and why cities need permaculture, suggested food urban strategies, some examples, and how to make a food forest.
A sustainable system is any system that in its lifetime can produce more energy than it takes to establish and maintain it. Permaculture design is the first system of conscious functional design in the world. That's its unique aspect. And functional design is sustainable.
Permaculture was a concept that Bill Mollison and I worked on in the 70s. Today we call sustainability. It was based on a simple question related to the design of agriculture. If most of nature is dominated by perennial plants, trees and other long-lived plants, why is our agriculture dominated by annual crops? Why doesn't it follow the design rules of nature? We've got used to the idea that for any sort of key problem or important activity, there's one big solution that trumps all others and some version of it ends up everywhere. Once you start dealing with nature and local resources, local situation, then the design solutions are all different.
When you look at a whole system, there are two things very undesirable. One is work and the other one is pollution. Pollution is a product of work. Work is a result of not supplying every component of your system with its needs. And let's put that in a way. If you didn't put a tank on your chicken house, you've got to carry water to the chicken. So you incur work. Now, if you don't collect the eggs from the chicken house, that's pollution. So pollution is an unused resource. It didn't go somewhere where it would be used.
It was actually the whole way we related to nature. And so human settlement, the design of houses, the way we organise everything in society was a part of that.
It comes from two Latin roots, permanence, to persist indefinitely, and culture, the practices that support human occupation. Put those together, it's a persistent system that supports human existence.
We eat food, we grow a garden, grow the food in the garden and bring those things back together, rather than the industrial system which stretches everything out in these long supply chains.
Another thing which is also extraordinarily intriguing, when you design well, nature takes hold of what you've done and does it better. What you've got to do is watch the system and guide its life.
So permaculture is really a design system for both sustainable land use and sustainable living.
I suppose the simplest thing to say is that an attempt to build a good place to live.
So here are some sustainable urban planning suggested strategies for Jordan. I wrote this as a sustainability proposal for 2020 till 2050 for Jordan. So we can use in empty spaces in neighborhoods, we can build them as neighborhood allotments for people to rent out or share spaces to plant food and create food gardens and food forests. This will improve the mental wellness and improves the immunity. For people, it's a food source. It fosters the connection between people and nature, and increases biodiversity and increases outdoor leisure time, beautifies the place, educates people about growing food, increases the biodiversity in that area, and therefore improves the climate and generates better rain patterns. We can also build eco-parks in cities with green building design and solar cells and wind turbines and ponds to increase biodiversity, and also add more biodiversity in that area. So we can add ducks and chicken, let's say. Create new opportunities for habitat restoration and education and recreation. That would be the benefits that we are going to get out of this. This will also encourage food rooftop. So this can also mean that we can also encourage food rooftop gardens for places with limited space, and people who have space can also have home gardens. Also, we can encourage collecting seeds, and we can start selling seeds and plantlets in supermarkets and donate these seeds to people to encourage them to plant their own food. We can also involve the schools and youth to donate, and we can donate land or assign land for allotments to schools to allow students to take part in planting, harvesting, and learning bushcraft and outdoor education just in general. The students can take part also in greening the roads in Jordan, and this will also mean that they can start leading sustainably by allowing them to get involved more in social media and school events and sharing about these things. This will generate resilient, responsible, happy, and healthy youth, educated and resourceful, empathetic and creative, guaranteed sustainable future for us, and low impact lifestyle. And this will mean we are also preparing them for leading a greener and more beautiful future. We can also find wealth in waste in our homes and our companies or shops. We can start learning how to use the food waste in order to make compost. And this compost means we have fertile soil and improving soil quality. It generates healthier food and plants for us and improves health, reduces landfill buildup, and reduces diseases, and they improve the climate eventually when we get fertile soil, and we don't get any more methane produced from the decomposition of food in landfill. Separating the waste and installing recycling bins in shops, homes, and roads. Waste can get sterilized and reused, and there are different types of waste that can be separated: organic, glass, metal, plastic, and paper. So this will encourage circular economy and the reuse of resources. This is going to reduce the carbon footprint and the need to extract petroleum and the cost to import it. This will reduce waste, and it's going to generate awareness about recycled plastic and about reducing plastic in general, because recycling is a problem, and it's very requires a lot of energy, and it's expensive, and it's a very messy project, and it's going to reduce landfill piles and avoid the poisoning of biodiversity, which is really what we're trying to do over here. All right, so now let's have a look at how we can make a food forest. So when we want to plant food in our garden or a vertical garden or in a shared landscape in the neighborhood, what should we plant now? There's something we call in permaculture a food forest. And now we're going to watch a short video about how, what are the components of food forest and how you can create one. There are actually many examples and you can go and look them up on YouTube or even on Google, but I'm just going to show you a brief introduction, and then later on, if you'd like to go into depth, you can you know, at your own pace enjoy that. We have planted a food forest at our school a couple of times, and it's actually very easy to be done once you understand how it's done. And now let's move on to watching this video together.
If you do nothing to a piece of land in temperate climates, it will become a forest. The forces of nature are actively moving the land towards a balanced, sustainable, and resilient ecosystem. This is called succession. In southwest England, an unusual forest is growing. Nut trees, fruit trees, shrubs, and perennial vegetables are planted in a way that mimics a natural woodland. This forest garden is the life's work of Martin Crawford, an unconventional gardener who grows 500 edible plants with just a few hours of maintenance per month.
What we think of as normal in terms of food production is actually not normal at all. Annual plants are very rare in nature, and yet most of our agricultural fields are full of annual plants. It's not normal. What's normal is a more forested or semi-forested system. Forest gardens in a temperate climate tend to have 7 layers or so: high trees, smaller trees, shrubs, perennials, ground cover layers, root crops, and climbers. So it includes directly useful plants, many types of fruit trees, both.
So you can go and now look up examples of shrubs, root plants, and these kind of plants, examples on what they are in real life that you consume on a daily basis. And these will give you what you could actually go and look for in your local garden shop.
Common ones and much less common fruit trees. All the types of nuts, tuber crops, vegetables, medicinal plants, timber, but also logs that you might grow other things on, like mushrooms. There are also plants of indirect use, system plants, to help the system function better. And that includes nitrogen-fixing plants, mineral accumulators, plants to attract beneficial insects to eat all your pests. Forest gardens are very beautiful places to be in, because although they're managed, the management is light, so they have this very naturalistic feel to them, and it is more like being out in nature than being in a cultivated garden. It can seem a bit overwhelming. There's so many different species. You shouldn't let that stop you from beginning a project, because you don't have to know everything to begin with. Just start, plant some trees, and go from there. It's not the gradually increasing temperatures that damage plants. It's the increase in extreme events, big storms, big winds, very heavy rain, hail, droughts. By having a very diverse system, whatever happens to the weather, most of your crops will probably do fine. Some may fail, some may do better. That's very important going into the future, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen to our weather. So by having a diverse system, it gives you maximum resilience.
So by the end of this tier, you're supposed to be, and one of the tasks that you're supposed to be doing is designing a food forest. You're going to suggest some plants, all of the 7 types of plants that were suggested. You're going to create kind of like you're going to take a map and add on that, like you can map out the different plants that you want to put and decide on what types you want and where you're going to plant them. But I'll give you details about this in the last video that's meant to be for describing your task. But just so you know that this is important for you to understand and know, because this is going to be helping you at the end for your task. All right, so now we're going to look at a video for an ecological designer and how he designs his farm or his, let's say, garden for food forests, and see how he takes us from really simple, basic ways and to how eventually it evolves into something really beautiful. So let's watch together.
Dan, you did some great permaculture design work and you've put out a new book recently. Can you give us an idea how you approach design? Because you do teach people design and get them familiar with actually design. How do you go about the process?
Absolutely. Some years ago, I spent quite a bit of time trying to develop a process, a stepped process or a progression of how I can design this and have all the information I need at each point to not waste time and to answer all the questions as I need to. And really what I start with in my process, and as I teach people too, is start with the most basic thing, and that's what I start with, is just basically scratch paper. I'll take a piece of grid paper, go out in the back or wherever, and this is basically a small backyard, measure things. It doesn't have to be accurate. It's full of mistakes. But as long as I have my measurements, you know, I go outside and I mark where things are. Then I come inside and I grab a nice piece of vellum graph paper and I measure everything out with a ruler and with really good pencils and get all of my measurements correct. That's my base map.
So this is a sort of rough grid graph paper.
Exactly.
Oh, well, grid paper, right? You call that? And then this is more accurate graph paper. So you go from here to here.
Right.
Where do you go from there?
Well, once I have my base map, then I start playing with bum wad or tracing paper, and I can use the base map underneath and start playing with positions of plants. I really don't know what species of plants. I just know I want fruit trees in here somewhere. There's going to be some shrubs in here and some perennials. So I build the structure of this planting area before I know what even the plants are. So I fill the space with trees and shrubs and perennials, and basically just using a little stencil, a little green stencil.
So you're saying that you just say, you're not thinking about the species of trees. You just say, I want a large tree there, evergreen or deciduous. I want a small bush there. I want a little plant there. And you just move it in sizes of circles.
Exactly. Right.
And why? Because it confuses you? You think it confuses you if you start thinking about plants too?
If you start putting in the species, there's so much bias in where you want it and how you want it that you really get off the ecological functions of the plant. What we're trying to build is structure, right? We're listening to nature. We're letting nature tell us how things should be. Which way is north? Where is the water? That's going to tell us where the trees are, right? And we put the biggest tree I can possibly fit in this space or a number of trees. And once my trees are set, then I look for the shrubs that I can put in and then the perennials that surround that. So it's the structure using a stencil or even freehanding to kind of see what is the best shape. And I'll do 4 or 5 of these, you know, really to kind of play with it. Well, what if the tree was over here? Or what if I'm using the shrubs in this sort of way, or if it's that sort of pattern? Then that's what the tracing paper is for. Once you get a really nice structure that you think you like, I even have my swales drawn in here, I have my access drawn in here, so I know how I'm going to get in and out of the garden and how my water is going to move in the garden. Once I'm happy with that, then I take the bum wad onto I put it actually underneath another drawing, so I trace that, and I trace my final design onto a new piece of vellum or a new piece of paper, and that's my design. I've got all my trees in, I've got my shrubs there, and you can tell it's a lot cleaner than the other design, but that's the point of, in your final design, it needs to be easily read so everybody understands where things go.
So do you then start to look at trees?
Exactly.
And do you give options? You could give options for each one of these numbers then.
Oh, you know, and really, if this backyard appeared in Tucson or in Portland or here in Minneapolis, the same shape would just be a different species of tree or shrub, because it's still getting the same sunlight or maybe the same water, but it's going to change based on the climate. At that point, I go to the plant database, or I go to my favorite database, and I find the plants that fit this space, and I start listing them all and picking what I want. In this case, I decided I wanted an apple tree in the middle and 3 Bali cherry trees, because I really like Bali cherries. So those were my main trees. They sized right in for dwarfs, and then I started surrounding them with nitrogen fixers and nutrient accumulators. So I had my main anchor plants, I call them, or diva plants, and I surrounded them with nitrogen fixers, dynamic accumulators, and then we just went out from there. And even with a design like this, there's a little sidewalk here. We put our smaller plants right by the sidewalk, so that's all strawberries. But as you're building the structure of your design, your access to all these plants is also very important. So trees are in back, and these smaller shrubs are in front, so I can see what's going on and I can also get access.
So anywhere within, say, a temperate climate, that's going to fit? If you go to tropics or desert, you're going to have different sun requirements. But within a climate, now you have, what's this database? You've got an actual database for the cold climates?
But we have an online plant database, and it's a relational database. It's called the Natural Capital Plant Database. And you put into it your site conditions, your growing zone, the type of soil you have, and then you search for, you want fruit trees, or you're looking for some kind of ecological service, and it outputs a database spreadsheet that opens up in Excel. And right there you have all the plants listed by scientific name, their height and their width, and that's the list you use to go find the plants that fit the structure of your space. So that's the Natural Capital Plant Database. That's online. It's very much tailored towards designers.
So we've got our initial rough, we go through all these bits of paper. We use our circle template. We've got our database.
Right.
Let's get this out of the way. Where do we go from here?
All right. Well, in some cases, and this is on vellum. This was done in Costa Rica. And in that case, this is the base map we did down there. This is done with a compass and a 300-foot tape, trying to find our base map so that we can just basically find what are the functional spaces, things like that. Once we have our base map drawn, we bring it, or we take a picture of it, or we have it scanned at an office supply store, and we bring it into Adobe Illustrator. And once it's in Adobe Illustrator, now we're free to do a lot of great work. Adobe Illustrator and a lot of the vector design software packages, you can build your plant symbols, you can size them up correctly, you build your plant symbol list, and you have your structure already, and then it's time to really start playing with how things are going to fit, and you have a chance to look at it. And since it's on the computer, it's easy to manipulate, it's easy to move things around, and especially when you're working with clients, and you bring this big design, they're going to change their mind or something's going to change, you can't get a certain plant, it's easy to change. There is kind of a steep learning curve with using these software packages. You really have to get fast, especially if you're doing this professionally. Time is money. So to do it well, and in our case, we like to be very clean. There's a lot of white space, there's the symbols, it's very easily read. But once you do this in Adobe Illustrator or something else, it's easy to change.
And then all these, you've still got numbers here, but they relate to a key. That's how it works?
Right, so all the plant symbols are related to a plant key, and so if you're looking for number 8, whatever that might be, it'd be bur oak. If you're looking for number 7, that's black locust. So, and that kind of, after a while, you kind of get to know the numbers on this. But one thing I should really mention is when you're working in these software packages, everything is in layers. You'll see the contour lines in here. That's a layer that we can turn off and turn on when we need it. The soil map, which you don't see here, that helps us find out what the soils are, that's another layer we have. So a project like this might have 17, 25 different layers of information for us to use to decide what plants we're going to put in, what will...
Okay, so I wanted you to look at this just to understand the big picture that can be, seen over here if we want to go on a large scale. So you can do something on a small scale, or you could do something on a large scale, and eventually you will become a landscape designer. And so you do have access from our school, you do have access to Adobe, and I'll show you how to do that later on. But it is possible for you to start small by just using some of the tools that he mentioned, just by drawing on graph paper and making your own key. And if you have access to using Photoshop or Illustrator, you'd like to, practice with that, also that's also possible. But the main thing for us is to actually understand what are the 7 layers for a food forest. Start experimenting with a small scale, like I want you to pick the seven parts of the 7 layers, and I want you to give examples, let's say, and I want you to design something, suggest something, and that would be it. Now this is going to be I'm not going to ask this from you now, I'm going to ask it from you. You're going to find all of these details at the end of this tier for your task in specific, but I'm just giving you an idea of how things can look like then. All right.